Joining us today is Deidre Anderson, Executive Director at Macquarie University, who will be speaking at IIR's Campus and Student Security Conference, which takes place on the 23rd to 24th of May 2011 in Melbourne. Hello Deidre, thanks for joining us today.
It's a pleasure, thank you.
Can you start by briefly explaining the Macquarie University Threat Assessment Team? How does it operate and what are its key aims?
Well, the Threat Assessment Team is exactly as the title describes, and that is trying to proactively identify any potential risk to people and or property that could ultimately cause harm to self or others. And how it works is really using the intelligence that exists within a community such as a university and making some sense of that intelligence so that both people and property, the harm of people and property can be minimised. So if you think about systems, it's about intelligent systems that can gather and pick up correlations between situations and people and be able to manage that before it escalates to something that could be quite serious.
And from your experience, what advice would you give to other universities in setting up a threat assessment team?
Well, I think the first one is to recognise that it is needed. I think too often our universities are seen as relatively safe places, and no one's suggesting that they're not. But with the high volume of people who are operating out of a confined space, who we have very little understanding about in terms of their mental health, the stresses that they may be under whilst on campus and off campus. It's important to be able to build a community that we all recognise is made up of individuals. So I think that's the first thing, recognise that it is an essential part of building a community where people feel safe and have a sense of belonging. Second thing is that it has to gain recognition from the highest end of leadership within the university, so your Vice-Chancellor has to see the essentiality of this. And thirdly, it has to involve the community as a whole. So we're talking here about not just the university community, but the emergency service personnel that operate and community services that operate within close proximity of the respective universities. So the police, fire brigade, and various other health and welfare agencies, and of course your local council.
And how do you actually quantify threat assessment versus risk assessment?
Well, threat in this case, risk is something that is carried out predominantly in terms of protecting the organisation's property and I guess management of an organisation, whereas threat is something that has come in at a very specific point in time that could pose a risk.
How do you characterise students who carry out threats?
Well, I think that would be characterised by harm to themselves or others, or in some way impacting on the safety and or quality of life of a person that was functioning within that environment.
And can you run me through a typical case with the threat assessment team that resulted in a positive outcome?
I think some generic examples could be a disruptive student in a classroom where the lecturers there's two ways that could unfold. The lecturers might ask the student to be quiet. The student continues to create havoc in that classroom. It's dealt with in a disciplinary way, and the student is brought to task. At the same time, that student may be seeing the mental health practitioners on campus because he's suffering with depression or some other form of mental illness. And that same person could be going and seeing the Dean of Students because they're not doing as well in their subjects as they would like. And those three, tentacles of the octopus may not be talking or were not talking. And as a consequence, that students' mental health state elevated to the point where they became at risk to themselves and to other people that they were coming into contact with, which resulted in quite a high level of paranoia. And and it extended beyond that to the point where it engaged the police. He was known to police for similar behaviour, and there was no, drawing together of that information to assist that person in any way, shape or form. So that would be one example. Another example might simply be different sorts of behavioural problems that are happening all over the campus, be it in accommodation or just in a sports club, or that end up being heard by a number of voices, be it a lecturer, being a student, a welfare worker, and getting a sense that something's not quite right, but not feeling as though, A, there was anywhere to report it, where that could be reported in a way that was anonymous or reported in a way that wasn't deemed to be tittle-tatting, but it was reported in a way that there was concern for this person's health and well-being. And so as a consequence of that, recognising there's no system in place to support it.
Deidre, you're speaking at IIR's Campus and Student Security Conference, which takes place on the 23rd to 24th of May 2011 in Melbourne. What would you like delegates to gain from attending your presentation?
I think what we're aiming for is a real practical application of how, why and when these sorts of threat assessment teams and campus safety projects can be elevated, and how to engage the whole campus in the solution of it.
Deidre Anderson, many thanks for your time today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.